plenty to discuss here, and I think we might as well just jump right into it. And we want to start with the ever at the top of the news story, unfortunately still, and that is the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. And we are very, very honored to be joined here on the show once again by Sevim Dagdelen, who is a Minister of Parliament in the Bundestag in Germany, and there she is the spokeswoman for international politics and disarmament for Die Linke, one of the parties there in the German parliament. Ms. Dagdelen, thank you so much for being back with us.
Well, thank you for having me. Thanks.
Well, it's a real honor to have you, and where you are in Germany. Well, I guess where we are here in the United States as well. There's yet another, even more conversation about more tanks, more missiles, more weapons to Ukraine to be sent to Ukraine. And I guess my first question for you here is, what is the impact that this continued escalation is going to have on Germany and have on Europe?
Well, first of all, we just have to make a view back. Since the war began a year and a half ago, Germany and the Western states have continuously expanded their military support for Ukraine in both quantity and in quality. Germany comes right after the US with the military aid for Ukraine. Germany's support for Ukraine alone to date totals 22 billion euros and a further 5 billion per year till 2027 at least, has been promised already by the German government. So the German government has crossed one red line after another in armed deliveries. The decision at the beginning of this year, following massive pressure from the United States to supply German Leopard 2 battle tanks to Ukraine, was a historic breach of a taboo. And however, NATO countries are supporting Ukraine not only with weapons, but also in particular through massive training of Ukrainian soldiers on these weapons here on German soil by Americans and intelligence cooperation. So this shows that Germany and its NATO allies are de facto belligerents in this proxy war. And the German government is currently considering supplying the so-called Taurus cruise missiles to Ukraine. These medium-range weapons have a range of 500 kilometers. That means from Berlin, 500 kilometers, it's in Moscow. And which would allow, as I said, Ukraine to hit Russian cities far beyond the border with these German missiles. And this would be a dangerous escalation, driving Germany further into war with Russia and threatening the security of the population here in Germany and in Europe, of course. And at the same time, we have to see that the populations of Germany and Europe, they are suffering massively the effects of Western economic sanctions. The sanctions have clearly failed to achieve their goal, like the German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock last year said. What is the goal? The goal of the sanctions are to ruin Russia. And while Germany's economy slumped by 0.3% in the past quarter, and stagnation also threatens the Eurozone, Russia's economy is now forecast to grow by 2.5% annually. So employees in Germany suffered a historically high real wage loss of 4% last year as a result of the sanctions, the skyrocketing prices, and the inflation. And the price of electricity in Germany is now 3 times higher than in the United States. So that makes very much trouble in the population, and still the population has a lot of skepticism, is against more escalation, is in favor of negotiations and more diplomacy, because instead of cheap gas by pipeline, Europe buys expensive LNG gas from Russia. That is one breaking news today. And it is sheer madness to drive up the prices of food and energy in this way and impoverish the population instead of repairing the Nord Stream pipeline and putting it back into operation. And that's
You know,
that makes it just one conclusion to me.
please.
All the friends of Europe, all the friends of Germany in the United States and of the European population in the United States, if they are in solidarity and if they are really in friendship with the people of Europe, they should stand up against the prolonging of this war. Against this war, against more weapon deliveries, they should stand up for negotiations, for a ceasefire, and for a peace, for compromise peace.
You know, I know that many nations around the world are increasingly calling for exactly what you just said, for peace. Many nations are calling for a serious plan for peace because of the disastrous consequences of this war. But then, of course, advocates of war insist that now is not the time. Sevim, how do you respond to those who say that seeking peace is the wrong policy?
You know, you cannot achieve peace by more war. You know, if you want to stop the war, you have to send diplomats instead of weapons. That's the only way to stop a war and to achieve a peace. That is the thing. And I think it is really cynical, very cynical by some colleagues in the United States, in the Senate. Recently, one US Senator, Mitt Romney, he revealed the strategy of the United States that behind prolonging the proxy war with exposing honesty, while describing the Ukraine war as a convenient, he said, a convenient opportunity for the US to weaken Russia and thus China without any casualties of its own. In other words, the people of Ukraine are to be sacrificed on the battlefield for disgusting, nasty US geopolitical interests. This is just cynical, you know, this is such a cynicism, and this is against humanity. Absolutely, it's a crime against humanity to prolong this war for the US geopolitical interest on European soil. And therefore, I think the Ukrainian counteroffensive has clearly failed. According to a report in the Washington Post, I mean, it's their own agencies, US American agencies, intelligence agencies see that way too, that this counteroffensive failed. So the thing is, do we have the right to push the Ukrainian people more to this war and to be killed? Whoever is against the killing and whoever is against the destroying of the Ukraine state as a state, all the cities and so on, they have to stop the war in sending more weapons, in sending more oil into this fire. You know, if you have a fire, you not bring some oil tanks to this fire to stop the fire if your house is in fire. You have to stop the fire with your fireworkers. You know, you have to call them, and that's the thing. What we have to do, we have to stop this war, and there is only one way to stop this war: in diplomacy, in negotiation, and therefore I'm very, very happy and welcoming all the peace initiatives by the BRICS states like Brazil, like China, or from South Africa or other African state, even the Vatican. The Pope is calling for peace and peace negotiations. So we have to stop this. The expansion of the BRICS the BRICS countries, which already, the other thing is, according to the BRICS, that's why I was just telling the expansion of the BRICS, the West is isolating itself globally with this pro-war policy as well. By prolonging the proxy war in Ukraine, the West is isolating itself globally because a large majority of states are participating neither in the armed deliveries nor in the economic war against Russia, and are instead calling for peace. And I think the West should support these peace calls by the BRICS states, for example.
No, I think very important point. I, saw yesterday that some Vatican official actually called the Pope a agent of Russian propaganda. But that's another topic for another time. But or if, of course, if you want to speak to that, I'd be
Eugene,
happy to.
we shouldn't allow these propagandists to stop us from our call for peace. And it's been the same, it's all over the same. It's always the same. As a German, I'm just reminding 1914, just beginning of the World War One. Everyone who was against the World War One and against the war credits, the credits here for the budget in Germany, where the World War One started, they called them as agents and spies for Russia and so on, and traitors of homeland. This is always the same. It's been in World War One, World War Two, and even with Libya, with Afghanistan, with Iraq. You're on the side of Saddam Hussein or you're on the side of Gaddafi. They are always trying to get you silent, to get the peace movement silent. We shouldn't allow this. We shouldn't be foolish by them, by these war propagandists.
No, I think that's an extraordinarily important point, and it raises another question. I mean, it seems to me, look from the outside looking in, that there is a rising peace sentiment in Germany and other countries in Europe. I don't know if that is the correct assessment to make here in the United States, but it does seem people are raising their voices a bit more.
Well, among the population, skepticism about the increasingly massive military support is growing rapidly. We have to see this. 55% of Germans are in favor of starting talks immediately with the aim of ending the war. And this, while we have 100% in the mainstream media propaganda in favor of the war, and still 55% or sometimes 60, 66 are in favor of more diplomacy to ending the war. But the German government, like most other governments in Europe, has no intention of diplomacy. Instead of representing the interest of its own people, the German government is subordinating Germany to United States policies aimed at prolonging the war. And the most striking example of this is the unwillingness of the German government to clarify the biggest terrorist attack we had on the Nord Stream pipelines, for example. In other words, on Germans' energy sovereignty, on our own sovereignty. Instead of bowing to directives from Washington on this issue as well, the German government should, as I said earlier, get the Nord Stream pipeline repaired and put it in operation again. This would be in the urgent interest of the German population, the German folks, and the German economy in having affordable, cheap energy again, like we had in the last century. And this is one thing where we can see the German government is not serving the people in Germany and the interests and the needs of the people, but they are serving the interests of the US elites. And Germany and Europe must no longer allow, they must no longer allow themselves to be pushed into the fire by the United States of America in the proxy war against Russia. It is of fundamental interest of Europe to end the war, which is taking place on European soil, not over there in your country, as quickly as possible and to prevent it from escalating further. Europe must work for a ceasefire and negotiation without preconditions. This could be the beginning of a sovereign and independent foreign policy for Europe. Subordination to the United States and NATO must come to an end.
Well, I think all of us here would certainly like to see that. And Sevim, I'm curious, do you see a relationship? Well, first of all, you've been an advocate for the freedom of Julian Assange for some time now. You've been very outspoken on this. Do you see a relationship between Julian Assange's persecution and the warlike policies of the governments that are seeking to imprison him for life?
Well, we know the reason why Julian Assange is in prison. The reason why Julian Assange is facing 175 years in a super high maximum prison in the United States, and the reason why he is locked up since, or lost his freedom since 13 years in UK and is in a maximum security prison in London for the last 1,603 days is because he published the US war crimes in Iraq, in Afghanistan. He published the torture program of the CIA, the global torture program. He published the darkness of the US foreign policy in Guantanamo or in Abu Ghraib, and the secret prisons around the world he put into the light. That's why he is in prison. He has shown the world that there is no clean and surgery wars like the propagandists of the Afghanistan war or the Iraq war always said, that they have clean wars. There is no clean war. And we have to say no war is our war. That's why we are standing up against the Iraq war, the Afghanistan war, and also against the Ukraine war. We are not in an alliance with governments. We are against war policies, and this is why Julian is in prison. They want to hide their war crimes. They want to hide their nasty wars, which always includes crimes, by the way, always. And that's why he is persecuted by the U.S. administration. It doesn't matter from which kind of government and administration, because the one is, blaming the other one to be bad, The Democrats are saying about the Republicans they are bad administration, but the thing is, it is the actual Joe Biden administration which is persecuting and is looking for locking him up for 175 years. And the continued detention of Julian Assange is a debacle of for the rule of law and democracy, and it is a disgrace that the collective West has abandoned this courageous, brave hero, I would say. He's not only a journalist, he's a hero of our time. And that even the German government, for example, which claims to have a values-based foreign policy, has remained silent on the persecution of the West's dissident. And this, although Germany plays a significant role in the U.S. persecution of Julian Assange, because in the indictment of the U.S. against Julian criminalizes political statements made at major events and congresses in Germany, and the common journalistic practice of cooperating with whistleblowers. So a conviction of Julian Assange in the United States would be a threat to media in Germany and Europe as well. So that's why I think the case of Julian Assange touches on Germany's democratic sovereignty as well. That's why I'm standing against this persecution and for his freedom, because I think fighting for the freedom of Julian Assange is the fight for the freedom itself.
Mm-hmm. Well, as always, Sevim Dagdelen, we are very honored for you to have been willing to join us here on the Freedom Side. And thanks again for giving us some of your time.
Thanks for having me. And, do your best work.
Thank you.